On today's episode of the Mark Titus Show, we are back from break, and good God Almighty, there's a lot to catch up on. SEC play has started, and as you all know, or maybe you don't, maybe you're new to the show, maybe you haven't been paying attention to college basketball, and for some reason, right as the football playoffs are getting ready to get fired up, that's the time you're like, I'm going to jump into college basketball. I'm going to see what's going on. The SEC in the non-conference was historically great. I don't know if it was the best all time, but I am a recency bias guy, and my read on what the SEC did in the non-conference play was like, yeah, this is some of the most dominant. I'm not really a big conference guy either in general, but also when a trend is so strong, you have to acknowledge it. And yeah, the story of the non-conference in college basketball this year was that the SEC as a whole, as a conference, like top to bottom, really, and that's kind of what makes this conference so good is yes, of course, they have maybe the two best teams in the country in Auburn and Tennessee, but the bottom of the conference is good. There are no teams whatsoever that are just even like South Carolina and Mississippi State beat the fuck out of. South Carolina might be the worst team in the conference, probably is. They're not that bad as far as like worst teams in a conference that has a shit ton of teams. South Carolina is not that bad. So that was the story of the SEC. We're now shifting into conference play week, or conference the opening week of conference play for the SEC, I should say. And all the attention is on the gauntlet that this conference is going to be for the next 2 or 3 months. And yeah, so far it was everything we wanted it to be. I mean, game of the year in Lexington, Florida versus Kentucky. Kentucky scores 106 points, wins 106-100 in regulation. I think Kentucky had like 25 assists, all sorts of shot making in that game. It was unbelievable. Kentucky couldn't hit a damn thing against Ohio State in the Garden, and the Buckeyes got a massive win beating Kentucky. And then they turn around and play Florida and can't miss. And Kobe Bryant is flexing his muscle as the best shooter in the country. And Florida gets to turn around and play Tennessee tomorrow. That's what the SEC is going to be. So SEC play has all the attention for basically everybody in college basketball. Tennessee, by the way, just completely broke Arkansas and has Cal firing off the excuses already that we didn't do shoot around, and maybe I should have done shoot around, but it was an early tip off, so we didn't do shoot around. And like it was a perfect Cal post game press conference where like technically he's right, but also why are you saying this, Cal? Very funny. But Tennessee continues to roll. They're the only undefeated team left in college basketball. Alabama, speaking of undefeated teams, Alabama destroys Oklahoma to end Oklahoma's perfect season. Is Bama back? Was Bama ever dead in the first place? Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. Speaking of being back, Villanova, not dead. Officially not dead. Villanova, they're not great. They're not Villanova of old. I don't think we're calling the banner printing shop and saying like, let's crack those knuckles and get ready to fire up the machine. But at the same time, with Villanova started this season horrendously, and thanks to Eric Dixon being, I mean, he's the best scorer in college basketball for sure, but I was going to say the best offensive player. I don't know. Cam Jones and Janai Broome might push back on that, but Eric Dixon is scoring the basketball at an absurd level right now. They beat the hell out of DePaul, and I know DePaul has not been great for a very long time, and I know DePaul, Villanova beating DePaul should not be news ever in college basketball, but DePaul is improved this year. They are not a total joke. Villanova is not the Villanova of old, and yet on this night, when Villanova plays DePaul and they win by 44, it feels like it's 2016 or 2018 all over again. Villanova just completely demolishes DePaul and has me wondering, is Villanova back? We'll find out on Wednesday because they got UConn coming up. What else? Meanwhile, the Big Ten picture is starting to materialize a little bit. Illinois gets the biggest win on the road against the top 10 team in the history of college basketball, beats Oregon. They score 109 points in regulation. They beat Oregon by like 31, was it? Was that the final margin? 30-something. I turned the game off. I was like, this is insane. Illinois couldn't miss. Destroy Oregon. What was it?
32.
32. They beat them by 32. Most points scored on the road team most points scored by a road team at Oregon ever. It's the most points Oregon has ever given up in Eugene. Illinois looks awesome, but then they followed up and don't look as great against Washington. They do still win, but that's kind of the Illinois story. Is like you catch them on the right night, you're like, this team might be the best team in the country. You catch them on another night, They're a little young. They can't inbound the ball. They get a little flustered in big spots. Michigan has a ho-hum win over USC. Michigan is positioning themselves as maybe the Big Ten favorite. UCLA loses at Nebraska. That kind of opens the door. I think UCLA was the favorite in the eyes of a lot of people. They were the favorite. They lose at Nebraska, though, and now it's starting to get a little more interesting. Michigan State gets a big win in Columbus in front of a very, we'll say, handsome crowd. Hostile crowd, sure, but it was remarkably handsome crowd as well. So the Big Ten picture is getting pretty interesting as well. There's a ton to talk about, dude. Since we've done a show, Jim Larranaga's retired. Greg Gumbel has died. Hubert Davis is on the hot seat, or maybe he's not. I don't know. There's a lot of chatter about that. Elliot Cadeau gets a 4-point play to kind of save temporarily Hubert Davis. They're not going to fire him in the middle of the season, I don't think. But also, this North Carolina season is in serious danger of going off the rails, and Notre Dame had him on the ropes, and boy, the North Carolina, they did it against UCLA too. They did that twice since we've last done a show, where they found a way to win these games. But yeah, Hubert Davis is a big talking point. There's a lot going on. I'm gonna do my best to touch on all of it, but SEC play is kind of the story of college basketball right now, because you just click on any SEC team schedule and you look at what's coming up and you just go, God damn, this is going to be crazy. And sure enough, like Florida's the big one this week. They go to Kentucky and then they host Tennessee tomorrow, and you're just like, this is what the SEC has become. So yeah, we'll talk about everything going on in college basketball. It's been a while. It's good to be back. Let's get into it. All right, we're back. And it's been, 2.5 weeks? It's been, what was the last show we did? December 18th, 17th?
Just before Christmas.
December. Yep. Boy, a lot has happened. Hubert Davis has been fired and unfired like 3 times. Mm-hmm. Jim Larranaga, I put him on the fraud power rankings, and then I think he listened to the show and he was like, yeah, he's kind of making some good points.
The fraud power rankings have been more powerful than I imagined this year.
Yeah, dude.
It's
one of the most powerful forces in media, really.
Yeah, they've made a lot of decisions.
Yeah. Jim Larranaga retired. That was news, but then that also feels like it happened a year ago. Doesn't, I mean, like there's been a shit ton of stuff that's happened since,
I didn't know if that was a New Year's joke or if that was actual.
No, it wasn't. But yeah, no, I'm not. I have a lot of bad jokes, but that one was not a New Year's joke. It does feel like it happened. Jim Larranaga retiring does feel like it happened like 5 weeks ago, and
there's been so much that has happened since last show, but then the first big conference Saturday just erases. It makes everything feel like a month.
Conference play is here. The game of the weekend and maybe the game of the year was Florida Kentucky. The shot making in this game was outrageous. This was I forget who said it, but it was Billis or Schulman or probably one of those guys that were on the call for the game. College basketball at its best. This is what if you're someone that thinks that college basketball is brickfest far too often, and it's guys that don't know how to play the game, and guys, turning and looking at their bench, asking their coach what to do, and do I dribble with my left hand or my right hand here, coach? Okay, left hand, cool, I'm going to go left hand. Now what do I do, coach? Okay, right hand. Which, from time to time that can happen with college basketball, is guys don't know what the hell they're doing, and it looks gross, and you get brickfests, and it's very sloppy play. This was the exact opposite of that. If you're someone who thinks that's what college basketball is, go back and watch this game, because this was up and down, shot making galore, 106-100 final score. One of those games where like Florida's first loss of the season, and Kentucky's a good team, and Florida, maybe feels like they should have won the game, and maybe as the season progresses, Florida will demonstrate that they're a better team than Kentucky. I don't know, but it's one of those games where like, even the team that loses, you don't really feel like they lost. Like there's no like, oh shit, maybe Florida will probably fall in the AP poll. But my thought watching that game isn't like, oh my God, Florida isn't as good as I thought they were. I was like, Florida's awesome. Kentucky's awesome. Kentucky, I will say, like has to play this way. Kentucky has to. I love this Kentucky team. I love how deep they are. I love how Jackson Robinson is their best player, but they also don't have a best player. He's also not always their best player, and they're just so balanced. And I think they had 6 guys in double figures in this game. I love the way they're constructed, and I'm a big Mark Pope believer, but I feel like this is like they kind of I'm a little worried that they might be one-dimensional insofar as like they have to get up and down. They have to score a lot of points. They have to get teams playing this style of basketball to feel really comfortable. And maybe I'm just saying that because I watched them brick a million shots against Ohio State and fall back down to earth in that game. But then they got it right back against Florida. Whatever. Point is, I thought this was a very high-level basketball game with two teams that should have Final Four aspirations, and I don't think that's unrealistic. And it was a great start to – it wasn't the only SEC game, and we'll talk about some of the others, but it was a great start to this idea that the SEC is head and shoulders better than all the other conferences. And then conference play starts, and that's kind of the first big game we get, and that's a great precursor for what's to come, I think.
Yeah, this game was as entertaining as can be. I saw Florida had the 5th most efficient offensive game in the entire country this year against Kentucky. The only problem was that Kentucky had the number 1 most efficient offensive game.
They had number 1 and number 5
in the same game. And you said Kentucky had 6 players in double figures. They did. They had 6 players over 14 points.
Wow.
And I'm just at what point I'm still seeing people say, is Kentucky a top 5 team? Is Kentucky truly a top 10 team? Because they're missing that like NBA talent star player. What have we seen? Aside from the Ohio State game,
but I think that's the issue. The issue is the plan B. It's always like what happens when you're not making shots, and I think that matters in college basketball because it's like inevitable. Maybe in the NBA that doesn't matter as much, or like other sports that doesn't matter as much. Like what happens if your plan A isn't quite as strong, and it's like, well, this is we don't have to worry about that because our plan A is fucking awesome. But there's enough history shown in college basketball, and certainly in a March Madness situation, one and done tournament situation, where you do need a plan B. And that was always my thing with Virginia basketball, was like they had an awesome plan A. Their plan B, like they could play defense and they could run very efficient offense. But what happens when teams are just bombing threes on their defense and and their assholes get tight and they're just looking around like, this doesn't ever happen to us. What do we do now? And then they finally figured out what a plan B was, and their offense was when they had in 2019 when they won the title. They ran a lot more just give Ty Jerome the ball and run some high ball screen type stuff, and a little more ISO. But they kind of figured out this will be what the plan B is if shit hits the fan, and I think that's ultimately what got them over the hump. And I think that would be my one concern with this Kentucky team. And I've been high on this Kentucky team since the preseason. Go back and watch the tapes. I'm a Mark Pope believer.
You are.
But if I'm being completely honest, they look good in certain contexts, and on Saturday that is the perfect context when you're playing a team. And I think this is going to serve them well in the SEC because I think Auburn is comfortable playing that way, and Auburn is better than Kentucky. But I think I think Kentucky could theoretically beat Auburn because they're I think if Kentucky tries to play an up and down game, Auburn would be like, we love this, we'll play with you. And maybe if Kentucky's feeling comfortable, I feel like they can beat anybody. Same with Alabama, certainly, obviously that's how Alabama loves to play. I am curious what will happen when Kentucky plays like a Tennessee though, which is a little bit of a different style of play being thrown at you.
So Kentucky has played under 70. They scored 77 points against Duke in that early season game. They've only played below that twice, and it's both their losses.
Right.
And they scored 66. Ohio State, they scored 65. Whose style is it? Do you think it's easier to force Kentucky out of their style? Do you think Kentucky's going to force you to play how they want to play?
I think players want to play how Kentucky plays. So I think when you play against a Kentucky type team and an Alabama, Alabama's the more
that game's gonna
the more exaggerated version of Kentucky, even where they obviously Alabama. Nate Oates believes that if you get a shot up before 10 seconds go off the shot clock, you get points for it. He's just they love to obviously push tempo. But players, if you're playing against a team like that, you fall into that trap because you want to get up and go, and it takes the coaches to pull you back. But yeah, I'm curious what will happen when Kentucky plays like a Tennessee's really the one, I guess. I'm looking through I guess A&M likes to slow it down. A&M can be a little A&M is a defensive-minded team that likes to muck it up a little bit. But I'm thinking of the part of what makes the SEC so good is, yes, the teams are good, but also they play aesthetically, as a conference as a whole, they play aesthetically pleasing basketball, and there's not a lot of muck it up type teams.
Right.
and I'm looking through right now. Like it would be Tennessee and A&M. Those would be the two that stand out to me. And those are, for me, when you look at Kentucky, those are going to be the markers of, like, can this team, like, what should we expect in March Madness? Because Kentucky is definitely a team that can beat anybody on any given night. There's no question about that. It's, can they win consistently? What happens when shots aren't falling? And I think, like, the Ohio State game and the Florida game are two perfect looks at, like, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for Kentucky.
Different ends of the spectrum. Yep.
And they got to figure out, like, they were obviously not making shots against Ohio State. And as easy it is to just hand wave it and just be like, wasn't our night. We weren't making shots. You know, that's what we want to do. We want to get a bunch of threes up. This is Mark Pope is a modern approach to basketball. He wants to push tempo, shoot threes. And, you know, sometimes you're just not going to hit them. Not our night. We'll flush the tape. We'll move on. As much as you want to do that, you can't do that when the postseason is constructed where if this happens in March, you're fucked.
Yeah, when you have to win 6 games in a row, the excuse can't be we didn't make shots that night.
Yeah.
That is going to happen in one of those 6 games where you're not going to shoot. And when their defense is 91st in the country, I don't know.
Yeah.
The difference in changing your styles is if a team can slow them down. I don't think your 91st ranked in the country defense then translate, like, you're still going to give up points because that's what you're used to doing. And then you have to slow down on offense. That's where you get beat.
They give up points because they want the ball back.
Right, but that's a problem in a slow game.
Yeah. They feel like their whole strategy is like, this is boring. I don't want to play, dude. Give me the ball back. I just want to give up a layup so we can push tempo and get it right back on the other end. But man, what a game! It was so fun to watch. And Florida, obviously, I mean, the 3 guards of Florida on this day, it was Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin. Will Richard, you know, was 0 for 3, had 9 from 3 at least, had 9 points. He was fine. He didn't have a bad game. He was just, you know, the other 2 guys were carrying the load. But those three guards of Florida are unreal. And I still very much believe in Florida as a Final Four team. Although it is interesting because, like, the SEC is obviously the best conference. I don't think there's any disputing that. And as I said at the top, like, there's an argument that they had, like, the best non-conference run of any conference. Really ever. I mean, like in my mind, the gap between 1 and 2, I guess, like, that is the SEC the strongest conference we've ever seen? I don't know, but is the gap between the SEC and number 2 the biggest? The top and the second best conference as big as it's ever been? I think it might be. I think it might be because you think of those years like the Big East has been dominant at times. The ACC has been dominant. The Big Ten has, through regular at times in the regular season. Obviously, the Big Ten has problems winning national championships, but there have been times where the Big Ten has looked like 2021 comes to mind, like the horrific NCAA tournament for the conference. But you go through that regular season, you're like, damn, this conference is absolutely loaded. But there was always, like, a second conference that was really good. There was always, like, when the Big East is really good, the ACC is, I don't know, man, the ACC, Carolina's pretty good, Syracuse is pretty good, Duke's pretty good. There was always like that second conference that was knocking on the door. And this year, the gap between the SEC and everyone else is insane. But I'm going to say this, Tate, because I think this is interesting to me. Kentucky and Florida, very good teams. I think they should, as I keep saying, they should have Final Four aspirations. Until Auburn, and I say that Tennessee's undefeated, number 1 team in the country. Until Auburn really looks susceptible, until the cracks start showing, and I know they lost to Duke, and I understand. I understand that Iowa State had them down. I think it was like 16 in Maui. But until I start seeing Auburn look anything less than, like, Auburn looks like the best team in the country, and I know Duke beat them, but until Auburn starts showing some cracks, I don't think this is my controversial take about the SEC as a guy who's very fired up about SEC play starting. I don't think the SEC is quite as interesting until Auburn comes back down to earth.
Really?
I think Auburn's the best team in the country until Auburn comes back down to earth. I think there's I think that a lot is being made of the SEC race, and I think Auburn is, until Auburn looks worse than they've looked, it's not as interesting to me. Now they have to go on the road. Who do they play? Who do they play coming up? They have their first road game.
They have Texas.
They play Texas.
Tomorrow.
That's right. It's Texas tomorrow.
South Carolina.
Auburn has to start going on the road. We'll see, like, road conference play. You start to learn stuff about some teams. I think Auburn, what we've seen from Auburn so far this season, I know Tennessee's number one. I know Tennessee's undefeated. Auburn has like 4 wins better than Tennessee's best win. Auburn is the best offense in the country. Their defense is absolutely absurd. They have the best player in the country. They have the best 6-man in the country. They have 0 weaknesses, in my opinion. And the Duke loss, yeah, I mean, Duke did beat them. They beat them at Duke, though. This was after Auburn was coming off of a trip to Maui. And I'm sort of making excuses, but I'm also just contextualizing what's good. I think Duke's the second best team in the country. So you're going on the road right after flying thousands of miles to Hawaii, playing 3 games, flying back, then you're going on the road to play the second best team. You lose to Duke. It's even a close game in that situation. What I'm saying is, I think and I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm not saying Auburn's going to go undefeated in SEC play. Right. I'm saying until I start seeing Auburn look anything less than dominant, because they destroy Missouri to open conference play. They beat the fuck out. Since we've been gone, they played Purdue on the 21st, which was a big college basketball day, December 21st. Beat the absolute shit out of Purdue. They beat our Buckeyes by 1,000, which for some people they're like, who cares? Ohio State's not that good anyway. But like I said, like Auburn's non-conference was so dominant that yes, the SEC is really, really good. Yes, the SEC could have, theoretically, if you want to get crazy, let's get crazy. They could have 4 Final Four teams. Yes, of course. But the actual conference race, until I see Auburn come back down to earth, and it could happen. They got to go on the road, and I think Texas could be a test. I don't think Texas is all that great, though. And for what it's worth, their road games are Texas, South Carolina, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss. Again, all these teams are like they're the bottom half of the conference. All these teams are good for being in the bottom half of the conference, but Auburn doesn't have Auburn plays Tennessee once this year, and it's at home at the end of January. They play Florida once this year. It's at home. And this is what I'm saying. It's like I think Auburn's the best team in the country. I think their schedule is favorable. And as excited as I am about the SEC, there's like a small voice in my head that's like, what if Auburn just wins this conference by like 2 or 3 games?
I want to be careful with how I say my words here, because I agree with you that Auburn is the true number 1 team in the country. And what they did in the non-conference is tenfold more impressive than what Tennessee has done based on level of competition. For you to sit here today, though, and say that what was the quote? Until you see Auburn come back down, you don't think it's competitive at the top? Or,
no, I don't think.
I think you're being a little disrespectful to Tennessee.
I think much is made about how deep the SEC is and how good these teams are, and I think there's a sizable gap between Auburn and Kentucky, say. And Kentucky is a team that I think is Final Four good. I think there's a sizable gap, I think, between Auburn and Florida even. Okay. I think there's a sizable gap between, and I think that's not disrespect to Florida, that's not disrespect to Kentucky. I think that's just like, if you were watching what Auburn has done so far this season, I need, for me, the story of the SEC is not, holy shit, they have a ton of awesome teams. Right now, it's that Auburn is the best team in the country, and I want to see, like, Tennessee's really fucking good. Tennessee could win the national championship. There's no question about that. There's levels to this, Tate.
Well, that's why
there's levels to this. I think Auburn. I think it's Auburn. I think it's Duke. I think it's Iowa State at the top, and then I think Tennessee is like knocking on the door, even though they're the number 1 team.
So a couple things. I want you to tier the SEC for me a little bit. Are you saying that right now you have Auburn in a tier of its own in the SEC? And then I want to hear what your second and then your third is. Because I would say Auburn and Tennessee have to be at the top together right now. And it sounds like you're saying Auburn's by itself, then Tennessee.
Well, yeah, Tennessee's 14-0. They're number 1 in the country. They obviously play great defense. We know that from Rick Barnes' teams. They're just as good as every Tennessee, every current or recent, I should say, iteration of Tennessee. Their defense is just as good as what you would expect out of a Tennessee team. Offense is not bad. Offense is good. Chaz Lanier could score the basketball. Chaz Lanier is probably going to be a first-team All-American quietly. I don't understand how it's remaining quiet, but like Chaz Lanier is just kind of like, we talk about Tennessee, it's just sort of the whole team, the whole iteration, the defense, the culture, the coach, whatever. But Chaz Lanier is like, I'm scoring the basketball.
Veterans. 6 of their top 8 are seniors. I love this Tennessee team.
Yeah, I'm very high on Tennessee. Like I said, Auburn has Tennessee's best win is going to Illinois and winning, which Illinois, I think Illinois is the best team, probably the most talented team in the Big Ten.
They do go to Florida tomorrow, so we might
Yeah.
able to say something a little different on our next show.
Yeah.
If Tennessee goes to Florida and handles them tomorrow night.
Right. But as it stands right now, when I watch Tennessee, I'm like, that's a really, really good Tennessee team. When I watch Auburn, I'm like, this is the best team in the country, and this team's
okay.
Fucking yeah. Like there's levels to it. I'm trying to put it in, it's the Chiefs versus the fucking Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Put it in like football terms. It's like the Vikings are good. Everyone thinks the Vikings are good. The Vikings are, what I don't know how, like it's not a disrespect thing to Tennessee. It's like I just think Auburn has been so dominant, and Auburn has like the I don't know. It'd be interesting. And Auburn will play Tennessee at home. That's what I think also matters, is that like Auburn's going to get Tennessee at home. But yeah, if I was tiering it, I would throw Tennessee in the tier with Auburn. But I think
so. Then where's
I would throw but I don't think it's there's no doubt in my mind that Auburn would be the number one team in the country. Like if I was paid, so like that's what makes it hard. And I do think that Tennessee, until I see Tennessee, I just think like the rest of these teams that like Duke played an insane non-conference schedule. Iowa State's in Maui, Auburn's in Maui. Houston played tough team. Like Tennessee didn't have the easiest non-conference schedule in the world. They went to Louisville, who's not a bad team. Louisville might end up being a tournament team. They beat the shit out of Louisville on Louisville's home court. They beat Illinois in Champaign. They just beat Arkansas by 1,000 and has John Calipari reeling already. But they beat Baylor on a neutral court. I think Baylor's like not that good. Baylor's just kind of just a mid-tier team. But they don't have. We haven't seen Tennessee against like the upper echelon, and we've seen Auburn play 2 or 3 of those games.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Duke play 2 or 3 of those games. We've seen Iowa State play some of those games. So that's my thing with Tennessee is I want to see, like you said, they're playing at Florida coming up and tomorrow, and
Mm-hmm.
they're going on the road to play Florida. We'll know more about them then, but yeah, I don't know. Tennessee fans are going to take it as a slight because that's exactly how fandom works, and you're going to think that I'm shitting on your team. I'm not. You're 14-0. You're ranked number 1 in the country. I think it's just Auburn is so much better. That's where I'm at with the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Is like I had like an epiphany as I was watching Auburn. I was like, God damn, this team is so fucking good. Like, what if the SEC race just isn't as interesting as we were hoping? Because this does happen from time to time. I mean, Houston joined the Big 12 last year, and we're like, oh my God, this is going to be unreal. We got Baylor, we got Kansas, Iowa State's going to be good. Oh, the Big 12 is going to be a gauntlet. And then Houston's like, watch this. And they just kind of cruise to the Big 12 championship.
I agree with you that Auburn, their resume, and if you just watch the games, Auburn looks like the clear best team in the country. I refuse to believe, though, that in this conference where we haven't even mentioned Alabama yet.
Yeah.
When we're talking about how deep even the top, like you said they might have 4 Final Four teams. They have 100%. They have the ability to have 4 Final Four teams. There's no way a team runs away with this conference, and that would be quite the tip of the cap to Auburn if they do.
I think there is a chance they run away with it. That's what I'm saying. I think there's a chance. There's a chance that I don't. So yeah, I don't know. I'm hedging my thoughts here because I don't expect it to happen. I'm just saying like I do think that there is a chance that like I don't know. And I mean, like, I don't know if you're a KenPom guy. This back, like, Auburn is there's like it's Auburn and Duke and everybody else according to KenPom right now. And that's kind of where I don't know, like, because as the calendars turn to January, I'm finding more people in my life asking me about like what's this college like give me a temperature read on what college basketball is, and I keep like my instinct, even though Tennessee is 14-0 and number 1 in the country, I keep just kind of saying the same thing where I'm like, it's Auburn, it's Duke, in some order. I know Duke beat Auburn, but Auburn probably has the overall better resume, but Duke did beat them, so it's Auburn and Duke at the top. I think Iowa State is up there as well. Iowa State's only loss on the season was to Auburn, and they were up by 18 in that game and let it slip away. And then they ended up losing by 2 points. I think Iowa State's in the mix too. And then Tennessee has 1 foot in that group as well. And like I think we're gonna find in the coming weeks whether Tennessee is like legitimately at the top. And again, it's insane to say because they're the only undefeated team left and they're 14-0. But if you watch the games, I don't think it's that crazy. I don't think it's that crazy. And Tennessee is wrecking everybody as well. So, but no, I think the SEC is going to be awesome. And that's not to say that like I don't mean to say that I'm not excited for the league or that I don't think that like I'm not a guy that like watches Kentucky, Florida, and I'm like, who gives a shit? Neither one of these teams are going to win the league. No,
You just think Auburn's that good.
Yeah, I think I just had like an epiphany of like, what if we're all like thinking, what if there's a 5-way tie at the top of the SEC? And I'm like, I think it's more. I'll put it that way because the Tennessee part makes it tough, and I do think Tennessee could ultimately end up being on Auburn's level to where that will be a 2-horse race in this conference. Like you said, Bama is a team that at the start of the season was picked to win this conference, and they're not bad. Bama's not as they lose
shit out of Oklahoma this weekend.
They lost at Purdue early, and then they lost to Oregon, and kind of threw everyone off their scent. But they're not going anywhere. They're still going to have to be reckoned with. But I think I guess I'll frame it this way. This is my final, as I'm trying to crystallize my thoughts here. I think it's more likely to me that Auburn wins this league by multiple games, which is to say they lose like 3 games and then Tennessee, second place, loses like 5 games. It's more likely that happens to me than that there's like a huge logjam at the top where like we're going into the final week and like Florida and Kentucky and Alabama and Tennessee and Auburn all are still in the running to win the league.
I think that's the best way you've put it. That makes sense.
I think going into this SEC, going into conference play, there is I don't know, maybe I'm just making this up, but I feel like there's kind of a belief that like this is going to be ultra competitive, and there might be like, well, oh my God, what if there's like a 5-way tie at the top? And I don't see it that way. I guess that's kind of the point I wanted to make, is like I think it's a little bit more of a clearly defined levels to this.
I think that's a great way to put it. The word epiphany that you used is a good one for it, because maybe 2 weeks ago when we're talking about the dominance of the SEC, you could have chosen a name out of a hat between about 6 teams in the conference. And if I told you they won the SEC, it's not the craziest thing in the world. Florida was undefeated, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama. There's Arkansas at the beginning of the year not to win the SEC, but we were talking about how talented they were. You're saying that the more you see.
Yeah, and what makes this conference so good and so strong? Like I keep saying, like South Carolina is probably the worst team. They're not, as far as worst teams go, in a league, they are pretty good. As far if you made every worst team in every conference play each other, South Carolina is winning that tournament pretty easily. Yeah. Like they're the best.
That's
worst
a good
team.
idea for
have all the instead of we have the NCAA tournament, the NIT, basically every other power conference team does have a tournament to go to. CBI, we just like keep. There are enough postseason tournaments at this point. We might as well let the worst teams play each other in a tournament. But it's also like the mid tier is outrageous in the SEC. It's the like Mississippi States and your Texas A&M, who like Texas A&M fans are going to take exception to me saying that they're a mid tier team. In the SEC, I kind of feel like they are, but they're a very good team.
I think Oklahoma's the best example because they got beat by 30 the other day to Alabama. Oklahoma's also beaten Michigan, who we're talking about to win the Big Ten.
Yeah. Arkansas is not like John Calipari's best team, but
just gotta have some shoot-arounds.
They're pretty good. That was crazy. That was very funny.
How do you say that out loud?
I mean, he's been doing it for years. That's the John Cal. I think Arkansas fans got their first taste of John. Like every Kentucky fan saw that clip and was like, God, it feels good to not have that guy.
I think this is about the 4th time we've said it on this show, but Saturday was the perfect example of Kentucky wins. They're proud of their team that had 25 assists, 6 turnovers. Their coach bleeds blue, all this. And then Calipari's like, maybe we should have had a shooter.
We should have had a shooter.
Before we got beat by 25.
Calipari's the king of the this isn't an excuse, but, and then says something.
So talk to me.
He's so good at it.
You obviously played Ohio State. What does that mean? So the game was at 1 o'clock?
I think it was noon Eastern, but 11 because they're playing in Tennessee. Knoxville's on Eastern time. Arkansas is Central time. Mm-hmm. So the body clock of Arkansas, this was an 11 a.m. tip-off.
And he said he's like,
and so
early for us.
Yeah.
Is that early? It's early to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's not having shoot around is not that crazy.
I was going to say, egregious that they did it or egregious that he said it?
It's more egregious that he said it. But he is the king of this, and this is what Arkansas fans are going to find out very quickly, is he is the king of like just slipping that in there, planting the seed of like just so everyone remember. And then now like there's just this idea that like, oh my God, yeah, sure, we got blown out by Tennessee, but like what would have happened if we did have the shoot around, Like you got to take that into context. But he's the king of like, this isn't an excuse, but just so everyone knows, like we didn't do shit. We just didn't do shit.
So what's it look
We didn't
like?
have time to do shoot around.
What's it look like if there's shoot around versus if there's not? Like, so he's just saying like, all right, guys, game's at 11, be there at.
They still got there early. They still got shots up. I don't know if they did a shoot around the night before. I do think that not having shoot around does matter. And I do think it does. It you know, and I think they are put in a tough spot where if it is like an 11 a.m. body clock thing, which, you know, for some people they're like, who gives a shit? These guys are young. It doesn't really, that stuff doesn't matter. I think it does. I do think it matters. Like the if you are used to a certain schedule now, you're going to a different time zone and waking up a little earlier and you have an earlier game. I do think that stuff does matter, and I think that not having a shoot around when you're playing a team, the number one team in the country on their home floor, that stuff matters. I don't think it matters enough to say it out loud and float it as an excuse. And even if it does matter, like you can't say that.
How many points is a shoot around worth?
Because you're given the schedule. You have to play this game. It's kind of on you as the coach and you as the players to get yourself ready to play the game, whatever it takes. Now, if you want to choose like sleeping in or, you know, getting the body clock right over getting the shoot around, that's your prerogative. But then you can't turn around and be like, you know, we were fucked by the tip time here, because that's absurd. And as far and like in a world where you know, the Big Ten is now coast to coast, the ACC is now coast to coast. Hell, the Big 12 is you got West Virginia and Arizona in the Big 12, and they're gonna have to fly all over the country. I don't want to hear about like we had to play a couple times. Yeah, Fayetteville to Knoxville. Like we had to play one time zone over. But yeah, that stuff does matter. It does matter. We used to do every road game when we were playing, we would do shoot around the night before. We would get to so we would practice in Columbus. If we're playing at like say Minnesota, I use that because Ohio State plays at Minnesota tonight. We would practice in Columbus. Like Ohio State's playing tonight, right? So yesterday we would have practiced in Columbus around 2 or 3, 4, 5 p.m., probably 2, 3-ish range. We would get on the plane, fly to Minnesota. We would go check into the hotel. We would then take the bus over to the gym. This is the ideal situation. We would do a shoot around for like a half an hour. We would get shots up the night before. Night before. You go to bed. You wake up. You maybe go back to the hotel. You watch film. You wake up the next day. Go do shoot around again.
What time is that?
Depends on what time the tip is. If it's a night game, you're doing shoot around at like 1 or 2 p.m.
Okay.
If it's a early, if it was like a noon game, you're probably doing like an 8 a.m. shoot around. Like, and so 7, you know, like it gets kind of early. You're like waking up at 7, you know. So Cal chose to not wake his guys up at 7, you know, to get breakfast and then go do a shoot around. Might make a lot of sense, but like it's
just verbalizing it.
The fact that they did, that's what it was. It's like this is the first taste of John Calipari at Arkansas, where it's like he's doing a press conference and he just floats the. By the way, we didn't get a shoot around, and it will not be the last. It will not be the last instance of that we get out of John Calipari. So Alabama beat the shit out of Oklahoma. We talked about. I don't think Oklahoma's as good as their record indicates, but Oklahoma's. You know, they've had a good start to the season. I don't think Oklahoma's a serious SEC contender. I think Bama is, you know, and all the talk that we've had about the SEC, you've done a good job of peppering in Bama, and I've done a good job of deflecting and ignoring it. I should not be doing that. We should talk about Alabama a little bit, because they, like I said, they've only lost 2, right? I said that earlier, that the first one was they lose at Purdue, and it was less that they lost at Purdue, because at the time we thought Purdue was going to be pretty good, and Mackey Arena is a very tough place to play. It was more like how that game unfolded, and like at no point did I feel like Bama was playing. At no point did I feel like Bama had control of the game, or like Bama was just reacting to everything Purdue was doing. Mark Sears was just kind of a passenger. He was just along for the ride. He follows that up after the Purdue game, going to Illinois. They beat Illinois, very good Illinois team. They hang 100 on Illinois in regulation. Mark Sears doesn't score, and you know, there's a lot of head scratching about. It's like, yeah, you won the game, but like your best player, the guy who was supposed to win National Player of the Year, what the hell's going on with him? Then they lose to they beat Houston in overtime in Vegas. They ended up losing to Oregon though in that event, and there are questions about like what the expectation should be with Alabama now. Should we readjust the expectation coming into the season? It was national title or bust. Now they lose a couple to 2 teams that aren't bad, but you know, Mark Sears, what the hell's going on with him? And meanwhile, as all this is happening, the rest of the SEC is just like being shot to the moon. And now we're in a situation where you wake up in January and you're like, oh yeah, I kind of forget about Alabama a little bit. Alabama is 12-2. Their offense, they have scored 107 and 105 points in the last 2 games. They scored 81 against Kent. Like they're not playing the hardest stretch of schedule right here. North Dakota, Kent State, South Dakota State, and Oklahoma. But they are scoring the basketball at a very high level. Mark Sears is playing well again. They are very deep, and I think Alabama might have something to say about all that SEC talk I just had. And we're only basically talking about Auburn and Tennessee.
I think Nate Oates has to love the position they're in right now, because you're right. At the beginning of the year, I mean, you talked to Bosco. Bosco was walking around getting sized for a ring, if you recall, with how good they were. And then they come out, and you said it well, they lost to 2 teams that aren't bad. Neither of those are bad losses, Purdue and Oregon, but also neither of those teams are national title contenders.
Right.
So it was interesting, and they kind of fell off the map. I mean, you can still get Alabama right now at 17-1 on DraftKings Sportsbook to win the national title. Alabama can absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they can win that.
Their offense, top 5 offense in the country. Their defense is not terrible.
The 2 things I'm worried about with Alabama is what you're saying. The defense is not terrible, but it's not elite.
Correct.
And the perfect scenario for Alabama is like Nate Oates is. I think he's a good coach. I think his downfall is he has a massive ego and he thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and he's like figured out. He's figured out an algorithm that no one else has figured out, which is we're going to shoot threes and play defense. And it's like, all right, Nate, you're a fucking genius, man. No one else.
3 is more
no
than
one,
2.
No one else thought of that. But their whole thing, obviously, is in an ideal situation, Alabama has a lockdown defense, and then they score at the rim and at the 3-point line. And then on offense, they're not trying to take mid range. They're a very modern approach to basketball, and they're taking it to the extreme at the college level. They're bringing the NBA type mindset to the college level. Let's get to the rim, let's shoot threes, let's penetrate and kick, and or do ball screens and excuse me, I always get the burps in the morning. Or Amori's rolling to the basket or post that, like whatever. We're scoring at the rim or we're scoring threes, right? They're scoring at the rim fine. Their 2-point field goal percentage is unbelievable. I think they're the best in the country, or if not, very close to it. They're not shooting the 3 well, Tate. That's a concern. They're shooting like 31%. 31? Is it 31?
31%.
They're shooting 31% from 3, and their defense is good, not great. And that is if we're doing like if we're nitpicking, and I think you have to at this level, because Alabama is even though they did lose the 2 games, I still think over the totality of the season they are going to be a national championship or bust type team. And if you're worried about the national championship run, it's that if you're not hitting shots, can you fall back on your defense? And I think in a perfect world through the years, Alabama has been able to do that. They've been unbelievable defensively, and I don't know how good this team has not been good enough defensively. They have not been good enough defensively. Like last year's team wasn't that good defensively, but they went to the Final Four.
I was going to say, you're talking about how you have to be able to fall back on your defense, and usually that is the truth when you talk about a team that goes far in the tournament, except for last year.
But then what happened when they got to the Final Four? They played a UConn offense that, I mean, I know UConn did that to everybody with their offense, but Bama was just like, fuck, we were not prepared for, to guard this offense. So, yeah, like can Alabama get to the Final Four? Yes. Can Alabama theoretically win a national championship? Yes. I do think they're going to have to play a little bit better defense than they have, and they have the pieces. There's no reason they can't get there. They can become a good defensive team, but they got to figure out the 3-point shooting really. And they lost their best 3-point shooter for the season. That's the concern.
I believe this says they're 249th in the country in 3-point percentage.
Not good.
That's not good. Their schedule to me is such an enigma. They're going to, if you look at how the SEC schedule was just drawn up, they end with at Tennessee, at Auburn, and Florida in the last week of the season.
That's insane.
So they're going to go on quite the run. Well, hopefully. And they're going to be right up there with the big dogs, and then you're going to find out once
at Tennessee, Florida, and then at Auburn.
At Auburn. Then the SEC tournament.
Good Lord. Question for you: do regular season college basketball titles matter? In an imbalanced schedule world, I grew up believing that the Big Ten regular season championship was as prestigious as it gets. Now, of course, I grew up in Big Ten country, and I was fed a lot of propaganda as a child. But I thought it was like, I thought when I was on the team in 2007, we won the regular season Big Ten title. Like my mom and dad were like crying, like holy shit, I can't believe our son was a part of a Big Ten regular season championship team. And now it does feel like there's a very large contingent of college basketball fans that are, and rightfully so, the imbalanced scheduling and the bloated conferences and all of that. You're like, a lot of it just might be dictated on what your schedule is. And I was saying that earlier with Auburn. Like Auburn has I think Auburn's the best team in the SEC. They also have a pretty favorable,
nice shake. Yeah.
I mean, there are a ton of tough games, obviously, because you can't avoid tough games in the SEC this year. But they got a pretty nice draw. I think Michigan's the same way. I think Michigan in the Big Ten. There's a lot of chatter about Michigan winning the Big Ten, and I feel like we can pivot to the Big Ten here in a second. But there's like 4 or 5 teams right now, I think, in the Big Ten that could win it. And Michigan's as good a pick as any because I think their schedule is pretty favorable. And I just wonder, like, how much – is that just loser talk, though? If you're a team that doesn't win, you're just like,
No.
Schedule.
I think – so you asked the question, how much value stock do you put into a regular season championship? I think we're similar in a way where the casual fan or the way the country has shifted, I think there's nothing better than a regular season championship.
Yeah.
Because you can't luck yourself into a national championship, obviously, but it takes 6 games and it takes some luck to do it. You can win your conference tournament in the last week of the season by the ball bouncing one way or the other. You cannot luck your way into a conference championship regular season.
Yeah, that was always the thinking because you have to play, especially like way back in the day, you always had to play like everybody home and away, and everybody gets the same crack. But now, I mean, I guess lucking your way to it would be you just don't have to. Oh, there are 3 other contenders. We just don't have to. But we don't have to go to play at their place. That's pretty awesome.
It definitely diminishes.
That's sweet.
Yeah, and you can make the analogy to football as well. There are teams that simply just avoid Oregon and Ohio State in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So it does diminish it in that way.
Oh yeah, with football this year, yeah, Ohio State played Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana, and then none of those other 3 played anybody else other than
Indiana's out there going 11-1.
But that's just kind of how it's going to be. And like this year, if we're talking to the football thing, like it was unfavorable for Ohio State. But in coming years, it might be like, oh wow, you don't have to play any of the ranked teams.
So why?
It just creates like a weird scenario where I do think people are eventually. It's going to happen enough where like the team that had the favorable schedule won the conference that. But then we all saw. Listen, man, we all saw it. Like this other team was actually the best team. They just had to play the harder schedule, where it just kind of undermines it. And I don't know. I still put a ton of weight in it. I still think it matters greatly. But
why? Talk to me about the imbalanced
like
schedule.
some people don't.
Why? Like so as much as we think the SEC is great, there's no one who thinks the SEC is better than the SEC.
Yeah.
Why do they have to play as many non-conference games? Why can't you do the home and home? You would own college basketball. You already do.
We have 18 teams in the Big Ten.
So how many?
That's 34 conference games.
So you would just play 0. You'd play.
That's 34 conference.
So that's the reason.
That's the reason.
That might be the answer. I don't know. I hate looking at this right now and seeing teams. Yeah, you only have to play Tennessee once. You get them at home. The other team has to play them twice, or the other team only plays them on the road.
Yeah. Quick break to talk about our friends at DraftKings NFL Playoffs. We're talking about NFL Playoffs. Oh, I see what I'm supposed to do the Jim Mora there, right? NFL Playoffs? We're talking about NFL Playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning the NFL playoffs, and the key to you scoring big is betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score 6. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big during the NFL playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code Titus. That's code Titus, Titus. For new customers, to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Let's talk about the Big Ten.
Okay.
So, coming into the season, the Big Ten's not as deep as the SEC. The Big Ten, I think the Big Ten is probably the second best conference. Maybe the Big 12 will have some to say about that. It depends on whether you want teams at the top or whether you want the depth. I think the Big 10 has the depth. The Big 12 has the actual title contenders. Right?
We would beat them in a Big 10, Big 12 challenge.
Yeah,
they have
like
2 people better than anyone we have.
You're I don't know. You're Iowa or you're Nebraska or you're hell, Ohio State, I'll throw us in the mid. Like your mid-tier Big Ten team, I think beats the mid-tier Big 12 team, but it also doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? But what I was
get in depth.
Who gives a shit? But the thing with the Big Ten coming into the season was there's probably no title contenders. If there are, I remember throwing out Indiana as a possibility just because the roster. Mike Woodson is still the coach, and it's not working out for Indiana. Indiana is not that great. Big win against Penn State yesterday, we should say, but Indiana is not a serious national title contender. But they had they won the transfer portal and had a good off. They won the offseason, I guess we'll say, in the conference. Purdue has the pedigree, the recent pedigree, and had just gone to the Final Four. And even though they lost Zach Edey, they have the Big Ten preseason Player of the Year. They have Mackey Arena. They have the part of them that cares deeply about winning the regular season Big Ten championship. Like, that is a point of pride for their conference. They have the most all time. So those were the two that I kind of pointed to, but I was like, listen, of those two, I don't think either one of them is a serious national title contender. Michigan is a big question mark because they have a new coach and a new roster, basically. Ohio State has a new coach and brought in a bunch of transfers. Michigan State has not been quite as good as they've been in the past, and there were questions there as like what their ceiling could possibly be and can they win the Big Ten. I'm trying to think of who else in the preseason. UCLA was in the mix. Oregon
from the West Coast.
The West Coast as a whole.
Yeah.
I'll just throw the whole West. I think Washington, I don't think anybody really thought they were going to be all that great, but they're just the whole West Coast question marks. The point was, it was a very, very hazy picture in the Big Ten. It was like, I don't know. Hell, I haven't even brought up Rutgers, who had the two of the best three freshmen in the country joining them. Very hazy picture. The Big Ten, unlike the SEC, the Big Ten started conference play in December because the Big Ten plays 20 conference games. SEC plays 18. The Big Ten is now, 3 games into the conference season? 4 games. Some teams, I think, have played 4. I think we're getting a little bit clearer picture. I think your Ohio States, your Indianas, I think are bowing out a little bit, and I think it's like, all right, we don't have like Wisconsin had the big win at home against Arizona in the non-conference, and it was like, oh my God, this guy John Tonja, you get a load of this guy, he's unfucking believable. Is Wisconsin gonna compete in the Big Ten? I think Wisconsin, they beat the fuck out of Iowa. Oh my God! But I don't think Wisconsin is a serious contender. But we're starting to get a clearer picture, and at the same time, Tate, I gotta say, it remains extremely hazy. Even though teams are like showing me enough to be like, okay, I don't really have to worry. Like Maryland's another team with Derek Queen was playing out of his mind, and they beat the hell out of Ohio State in College Park. And I was like, man, maybe this Maryland team could hell, the Big Ten is down this year. Maybe Maryland could sneak in there and win the conference. I don't think Maryland's gonna win it, but at the same time, we're 3 or 4 games into the conference schedule, and I think I stand by Illinois being the highest ceiling team. I think Illinois, what you saw Illinois do at Oregon, is Illinois obviously at their best. They score 109 points in regulation. They do not miss. Yakuchonis is like in total control of the game at all times. Kylan Boswell was like stepping into threes as confidently as I've ever seen him. Yakuchonis he's something, man, because he's so talented, but he also has 2 or 3 boneheaded plays every single time I watch that guy. But their talent is outrageous. They have so much length. They have so much talent. And I think Illinois very clearly has the highest ceiling. But I think Michigan is not going anywhere. I think Michigan State, watching them in Columbus, I went to the game, the Ohio State-Michigan State game in Columbus on Friday. I've said about Michigan State a handful of times this season, I don't think they have a ton of individual talent, but I think they do all the Tom Izzo stuff really, really well. And I was just like losing my fucking mind in Columbus because I was sort of patting myself on the back for being so right, but I was also like watching the Michigan State, the revolving door of Michigan State big men dice us up, and all of them are just, frankly, I say this lovingly, frankly, just not that good, but they're just destroying us. Was so frustrated. They were so physical, and just like there were 12 big men they were bringing off the bench, and there's just a revolving door of just like, oh, there's another guy, and he's going to beat the shit out of us on the glass. And their guards are going to be super physical, and they're going to push tempo, and they're going to jack threes and miss them all. But then they're going to grab the offensive rebound and kick it out and shoot another 3 and miss that one, and then grab an offensive rebound and get fouled as they're putting it up, and then go 2 for 2 from the line. And it's like, that was a disgusting possession of basketball, but yet they scored 2 points. That's what Michigan State's going to be all year. And I think Michigan State. I walked away from the Columbia game. I was like, fuck it, Michigan State might win the Big Ten. I don't think they're that good, but I think they're very good at getting teams to play their style of basketball, and I think they are a team that is fully bought in. And it sounds like an insult when I say it. Like, I don't think they're super talented. Like, Jaden Akins is their most talented player. I don't think he's like, obviously like all-American level good or anything, and he's not going to be like an all-time great in Michigan State history. But every single one of those dudes is buying what Tom Izzo is selling, and they're all like bought in. And I sort of believe in the culture of Michigan State in a year when the Big Ten's kind of down, that they might make a run at this.
That might be enough this year. We talked at the beginning of the season. I think we both chose Purdue on day one because we said, with so many question marks, I'll take the culture. I'll take the tradition and the winning and the recency. That seems like where Michigan State is right now. Just based on the coaching and how they play, that might be enough. How many teams this year, Mark, do you think? So I think that Ohio State, Wisconsin, Rutgers, who we kind of talked about in the mix at the beginning, they've bowed out. They're not going to win the Big Ten. How many teams now do you still think can win the Big Ten? Like, would you be shocked? You wouldn't be shocked to hear blank win the Big Ten.
Yeah, so in the way I said about the SEC, I feel like it's Auburn, and if it's not Auburn, it's going to be Tennessee, and if it's not Tennessee, then something insane happened, and somebody probably got hurt along the way or something. And as crazy as the SEC is, I don't think it's a logjam at the top as everyone sort of feels like it might be. The Big Ten, I do, and I still think, even though like it's sort of materializing, and I thought there was a chance I thought coming into the season there was a chance Ohio State might fuck around and make it interesting. We're not winning the Big Ten. We don't have big guys. We don't, we're very obviously. I hope we can still make the tournament, but we're not winning the Big Ten. I think there are probably 5 though. I think it's, again, Illinois I would phrase as has the highest ceiling. Does
that mean that if feet to the fire right now, you would choose them over the long haul, or you're saying that if they could win more?
If I had to pick one team to win the national championship from the Big Ten, I'd pick Illinois.
Okay.
I would pick Illinois, and I think Illinois is the only team that I would trust that would have the horses to go up against your Auburns and your Dukes and whoever else. Which I don't think Illinois would win the Big. You understand what I'm
100%,
saying? Like, I'm not saying Illinois can hang with those teams necessarily, but they on their best night, I think they could theoretically win the national championship. I think it's Illinois. I think it's Michigan, who is. I think Michigan's going to just be steady as they go, and just Michigan has lost 2 or 3 now, but I think every loss has been one possession. 3 bounces of the ball away from being undefeated. But they haven't played the toughest schedule in the world, which I don't fault Dusty May for. I'm a huge proponent on if you're a year one coach, play a cupcake schedule. Yep. Play as easy as a schedule you can possibly play. Get everybody excited about the team again. So Michigan, I don't know, they weren't just playing directional schools in the preseason. They did go to Wake Forest. Did they play Wake Forest at Wake Forest?
It was semi away, was down there but not.
It was in North Carolina. It was in Charlotte or something. They played Oklahoma on the neutral court. They played Arkansas. They played a few teams, but they haven't played like the upper echelon type teams. But they're not going to in the Big Ten because we don't really have them. And Michigan has looked really, really just very steady, and Danny Wolf is unguardable, and awesome. I still worry about the guard play a little bit for Michigan, but I think Michigan can certainly win the Big Ten. And are they the favorites?
Right now, Michigan and Michigan State are the top 2, and then who did you mention? Illinois. So I think Michigan State could, for all the reasons I just said. Like, I don't love the roster per se, but I love the buy-in and the culture, and they make their free. For a team that's really physical. Here's what was frustrating the fuck out of me is that they are very physical, and that's what Tom Izzo does. Is he teaches his guys to just Tom Izzo is pull out the football pads, excuse me, put the bubble on the rim, and that's how we're going to play Michigan State basketball in practice. Is we're going to just beat the shit out of each other, and then we're going to carry it over to the games. They're really good at establishing physicality in a game, and then with that comes a lot of foul calls, and then
they make their free throws.
Yep.
And they're a great free throw shooting team. They can't hit threes for shit.
Mm-hmm.
They can't shoot threes for it. They
339th.
It is gross to watch them shoot threes. But they make their free throws.
Fifth in free throws.
And their guards get after it defensively, and I think, that might be enough to win the Big Ten. I still think Purdue theoretically has a chance. The Purdue does not have a great team, but Purdue has great players. Purdue has they don't have a ton of depth. But they have the home court advantage. They have maybe the best player in the conference, Braden Smith. They have Trey Kaufman-Wren is awesome. Obviously, they might have two of the top 3, 4, 5 players in the conference. They just don't have the depth, and they don't have enough consistency from the rest of the guys. But yeah, if Purdue won the Big Ten, I wouldn't be stunned by that. So I'd throw them in the mix. What are we at? 5 now?
Was that 5?
2 Michigans, Illinois.
Purdue.
Oh, Purdue. UCLA. I would keep in there. UCLA is the best defensive team in the conference. They just lost to Nebraska, but Nebraska is not as bad as maybe people think they are. But UCLA's offense is this just feels like a quintessential Mick Cronin team where like they're just gonna muck it up. And like the UCLA Michigan State. When do they play? When does UCLA Michigan State play?
They play next. They play tomorrow. At UCLA. Michigan goes to UCLA.
No, Michigan State. I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Michigan.
Yeah,
State.
Michigan UCLA is tomorrow. That's gonna be a fun game. But
February 4th.
February 4th, UCLA Michigan
Only
State
one
game
time this year.
could be the most disgusting game of basketball with conference title implications.
59-56.
A lot of brick shots and a lot of great defense. But UCLA, I think UCLA plays the best defense in the conference, and I still think they can win the conference, and they might be my pick. Actually, they might be sneaky my pick.
Do they benefit from?
I don't know.
Everyone having to go out there.
Yeah, they benefit from that.
Okay.
They benefit from. I like to think defense travels. Like they guarded Nebraska well. They just couldn't. They couldn't hit anything. I think right now. With Michigan being undefeated and already having a road win at Wisconsin, like that kind of puts them in the driver's seat a little bit. But then Michigan State has a win at Ohio State. I don't know. I guess the Michigan schools, it makes sense that they would be the favorites. I think there's 5 though. I think I'd probably draw the line there. I think who else would be in the mix? Indiana, no, absolutely not. Oregon.
There was a time where we thought Oregon.
Oregon's lost 2 already.
It's UCLA and Illinois, which aren't terrible losses. They got the shit kicked out of them by Illinois though.
Who's that?
UCLA. I'm sorry, Oregon.
Oregon, yeah, Oregon. Oregon got destroyed by Oregon's played 2 top tier Big Ten teams, like 2 teams, 2 other contenders, and they've lost them both. And they lost them both on their home court. So like that, I think Oregon for the time being, we put them to the side. And I think it's those 5. I think Indiana's sitting at 3-1 in the conference and still has, like, again, it's insane to say because they have not looked like a great basketball team. But when you look at the roster that Indiana has, and if you are a complete and total moron that doesn't pay attention to Mike Woodson being their coach, you could squint hard enough and be like, what if Mike Woodson, and like you could maybe talk yourself into Indiana, but we know how that story is going to go, and inevitably Indiana's going to fuck it up. Let's just be honest. They're not going to be great. But I think the Big Ten is a 5-horse race, and I have no idea what's going to come of the Big Ten. So like the Big Ten, the SEC is way better than the Big Ten, and I know I'm a Big Ten guy, so people are going to think I'm just saying this because I'm a Big Ten guy, but I think the Big Ten is going to end up being more competitive at the top because there's truly
5, 6, 7 loss champion. Like
they're
all gonna.
It's gonna be like there's gonna like Ohio State could end up finishing like 2 games behind the champion in the Big Ten standings, and we'll be like the 10 seed in the Big Ten tournament. That could be where we're headed. So what else we got to talk about?
We got to talk about Villanova.
Villanova's back. Yeah, Villanova is Eric Dixon is. I mean, good for 25 a night. He's averaging like 26, but he's averaging 26 in a way where he's scoring. He's not like scoring like 42 one night and then like 12.
No, his
the next
game
night.
log is 25, 28, 27, 27.
He scores 25 like every single
night.
He's just he's like Kevin Durant out there. Like he's not going to score 50, but he's also not going to score 10. He's just like every single night he's finding a way to bring 25 to 30 points to the table. Yeah, they started 3-4. That was when we really
I owe Kyle Neptune an apology.
we really got crazy about the idea of the Cincinnati game was the big one when Cincinnati came to Philly and they beat Cincinnati pretty handily. I mean, I think it was like a 10-point game. But if you watch that game, like Villanova was in control and had Cincinnati at arm's length basically the entire game. That was kind of the turning point for them, and they've looked like a completely different team. Now, I should say we should put some qualifiers on this. Other than the Cincinnati win, they have beaten 0 NCAA tournament teams.
That is true.
They have not. They are not exactly, this isn't like the UConn being back deal where like UConn goes to Maui and loses 3 straight, and then UConn turns around and beats Baylor, beats Texas.
Yep.
Like that felt like
beats Gonzaga.
Beats Gonzaga as well. Yeah, completely forgot about that. That was something. Villanova being back they beat Temple by almost 30, granted, but they beat Temple, they beat Fairleigh Dickinson, they beat Seton Hall, they beat Butler, they beat DePaul. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Depends how you look at it.
But they are winning these
full.
games, and this is a team that lost to Columbia, that lost to St. Joe's, that lost to Virginia early in the season. So, these wins you should not take for granted in the Kyle Neptune era. But be that as it may, they are rolling a little bit. The Big East isn't as deep and as strong as we're accustomed to seeing from the Big East. I don't think like Villanova is very clearly right now not an NCAA tournament team.
But Mark, this is the week. This week for Villanova, they host UConn, and then they go to St. John's.
This is the big test.
We could be talking a week from today. If they beat UConn and St. John's, they are a tournament team.
You were telling me that there's chatter around the office about Eric Dixon, National Player of the Year. Someone did. I assume it was Big Cat put money on this, and now he's sending out the newsletter that's like, make sure everybody talks about Eric Dixon.
The propaganda machine.
The propaganda.
It all starts with Max because Max is a Villanova guy.
Yeah.
But now, and Ebo as well, Eric Dixon is averaging 26 points per game. If you're averaging 26 points per game in the Big East and you make the tournament, you are a top 10, top 5 player of the year candidate, are you not?
He's a first-team All-Americans for me were probably Chaz Lanier, Eric Dixon, Cam Jones, and then the 2 big ones, Cooper Flagg and Janai Broom. That's probably, without thinking about it too much, I think Eric Dixon would be a first-team
He's
All-American.
shooting 50% from 3. He's shooting 7.
He's unguardable. He's like literally unguardable.
As a power forward.
He's a big body that can, that has. He's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. As a guy who's a fucking tank.
Crazy.
So you can't guard him down low. He can grab offensive rebounds and he can pick and pop. He can do it all. He can do it all offensively, and he's completely unguardable. But he's not great defensively though.
No,
that's a problem.
Does that matter to you in your
the problem with him winning National Player of the Year? Because Ebo was texting me about it a little bit about it yesterday too. He's like, I just put some money on Eric Dixon to win National Player of the Year.
100 to 1.
Was that insane? And I said no. Insofar as like he's good, and I see you, Eric Dixon. I want to be clear. I see you. I tip my cap to you. You are playing unreal basketball. But to me, it feels like, again, if I'm putting it in football terms, because that's how I have to put it in terms so people understand. It feels a little bit like the Joe Burrow MVP case, where no one's saying Joe Burrow wasn't balling out. Of course, we all see it. But in order for Joe Burrow to win MVP, he's going to, 1, need his team to play better and win more games, and 2, he's going to need the guys who are ahead of him to fall off a cliff, and that's kind of the problem that Eric Dixon has.
They were sitting in the gambling cave, and they said to me, like, can he win because he's averaging this many points in the Power 5? I said, yes, if Janai Broom and Cooper Flagg have to die, like, basically, because I think it's just for later.
I think that Janai Broom and Cooper Flagg are so far ahead of Eric Dixon right now, and given that their teams are so good, I think that, and that's how Joe Burrow was too. It was like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Like, yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow could theoretically win MVP, but it's going to take those 2 guys to fall down, right?
I believe Burrow leads the NFL in passing touchdowns and passing yards. It's Eric Dixon to a T. He's leading in these statistical categories, but his team missed the playoffs.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is Hubert Davis. So North Carolina, for those who aren't paying attention, North Carolina is 9-6 on the season. They just beat Notre Dame. They miraculously beat Notre Dame. Ellie Cadeau gets a 4-point play with like 4 seconds left, I think, to win the game for Carolina in South Bend. This coming off of a 13-point loss at Louisville. I can't make sense of Louisville. Louisville's a team and a fan base that is excited to just love basketball again. And it's actually fun for them, and they're actually enjoying. Like Louisville went to Charlottesville and beat Virginia for the first time since 1990.
Awesome.
Virginia owns Louisville, and in the Tony Bennett era, Virginia beat Louisville all the time. There was the one game. Boy, I forget how long ago it was. It was like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, where Virginia. What did they do? I should have looked it up before, but Virginia scored like 5 points in the final like 3 seconds to beat Louisville. It was such an owning. Virginia owned Louisville so much that even when Louisville had Virginia beat, they would still find a way to fuck it up and hand Virginia the win. It was crazy.
Trailing by 4 with 0.9 seconds.
That's what it was. They're down 4 with 0.9 seconds to go, and Virginia still won the game. That is historically what that matchup has been in the ACC. And so for Louisville to go on the road and beat Virginia by 20, that Louisville fans are over the moon. And I do think that Louisville is going to be a bubble team, and I think it's realistic to say that they could make the NCAA tournament. So it's not the worst loss in the world for Carolina, but this is a Carolina team that when you look at their season so far, their 6 losses are Kansas, Auburn, Michigan State, Bama, Florida, and Louisville. So all 6 of them are like pretty good teams, and they might all end up being it might end up being 6 tournament teams if Louisville makes it. But the wins, their best win is UCLA and Madison Square Garden, where they were down and had to. I mean, R.J. Davis had to save them in that game. Their other good win is Dayton and Maui, where they were down and they had to be saved, and they had to come roaring back in the second half to win that game. And then Notre Dame, same sort of deal, is like they were on the ropes and about to lose that one, and they had to, they stole victory from the jaws of defeat, as they say. All 3 of those wins count, Tate. Mm-hmm. All 3 of those wins, I'm not saying, we put asterisks on them, but given the context of the season, you're looking at there's not been any other than, I would say, the first half of Kansas when Carolina looked awesome. Or the second half, I should say, I remember it was a tale of 2 halves. The second half of Kansas game where Carolina came roaring back, North Carolina has not looked particularly great at any point this season. They are 9-6. They as of right now, I don't know what the bracketologists are saying about them in the NCAA tournament. I think the UCLA win might be sort of 9-6 is not a good record, but if we're like forecasting what the ACC is not great, so they're gonna probably be fine there. But there is a realistic discussion that North Carolina could miss the NCAA tournament. And if they do, that would be the second time in 4 years that Hubert Davis has missed the tournament. And there is increasing chatter about Hubert Davis being on the hot seat because this Carolina team is one, not particularly good, but 2, there doesn't really seem to be a ton of hope in the future. The recruiting is not as good as it should be. The NIL is like strangely missing. And he's replacing the second best coach, or maybe the best coach. I don't know how Carolina fans see that between Roy and Dean, but he's replacing an all-time legend, which is very impossible to do. I don't know. I find it interesting because I don't necessarily think Hubert Davis is going to get fired, but if he misses the tournament and he does get fired, no part of me is going to cry for him.
Well, you're saying it. I think this would be a hell of an exercise to debate either way. Should he be on the hot seat? Should he not? Because the way you're saying it, if he misses the tournament for the second time in 4 years, that's unacceptable at North Carolina.
Yeah.
What did he do his other 2 years, though? He was a number 1 seed, made the Sweet 16, and he made the national championship and ended.
Yeah, but that's
that career.
Yeah, but that's a problem when you can't become too enamored with the first year national championship run, because then you're saying. Well, not even that. It's just like it. You look back on the run and you're like, this was like kind of just like a lightning in the bottle type thing, maybe. Kevin Ollie won a national championship, and UConn fans like laugh in his face when his name gets brought up.
Yeah.
Kevin Ollie was a guy won them a national championship, and they're like, get this fucking guy out of here, dude. What a bozo. So it's not always. Like, one run isn't always indicative of what's to come. But, yeah, I mean, at the time, like year 1, he's going to the national championship. He was up 20 at halftime in the national championship game. But then all that was erased when year 2, you're the number 1 team in the country entering the season, you missed the tournament.
But then year 3, you win the ACC regular season championship.
Is that so? Do you want that up and down?
No, I'm just saying that you could argue, like, what are we talking about? Dude's on the hot seat.
Well, we're talking about two out of 4 years you missed the tournament. Yeah. That's bad.
I think the
ACC, like if in a weakened ACC, and it's really like if you watch the Carolina games, they have no structure. They have no.
It's open gym.
It's just basically open gym. Yeah, it very much feels like open gym. Their big guys are all terrible. They're dreadful. And there's really just no hope. I think that's the issue for Carolina fans right now. Is like there's both no hope for this team and that like there's no path where you're like, I trust that we're gonna figure this out, and I trust that once this starts clicking, we're gonna put some stuff together and we're gonna. It's just basically open gym, and you got like a handful of talented dudes that are out there making plays from time to time. But other than that, it's like this. I guess this is just who we are. But then also forecasting the future years in advance, like there's kind of no hope there. Where you're like, what does recruiting look like?
Do you know what recruiting looks like?
Not good.
So 2025 next year, and I get that things can change, and I also get you can get in the portal. What do you think North Carolina is ranked on 247 team recruiting?
There's no number high enough that I wouldn't believe.
37.
Yeah, that checks out.
When did that become a thing?
With Carolina recruiting?
So 5 stars. Duke has 4 of them committed. Houston has 3 of them.
Yeah.
Connecticut 3. Arkansas has a couple. Kentucky, Notre Dame. Carolina has 0?
This has been a problem for a while. Yeah, this has been an issue for a while. I put Michael Jordan on the fraud.
You did?
Number 1 on the fraud power rankings for this reason.
They
don't have any NIL. Now, I'm worried about the transfer portal too. You say like recruiting doesn't matter in this modern college basketball. Just get in the portal and get dudes. They don't really do that either. I don't know what the
BYU's got them. Michigan's got them.
Yeah, I don't know what the
That's the biggest problem.
Well, I don't know what the future holds for Carolina. And the problem like with their NCAA tournament hopes this year is that the ACC, yes, it's bad, so you can like rack up a bunch of wins, but how many opportunities do you have to get definitive? What do they say? The quad 1 win. I don't even know what the quads mean anymore, but the like. Grab your lapels and shake you type wins where you're like, look at this, take a look at this one. What about this one? Because the three they have, like they won all 3. Notre Dame's not even that great of a win, to be honest with you. Notre Dame's not particularly good, but that's their 3rd best win. Their 3 best wins, the 3 wins that are not just total jokes are Dayton, UCLA, and Notre Dame. And in all 3 of those games, they needed miracles to win them. They needed miracles. So like I don't know how many opportunities they're going to have. They're going to have Duke twice.
So, correct me if I'm wrong.
They have Pitt and Clemson.
If I told you
they already lost to Louisville. Did they play Louisville again? I don't think so.
No.
I think that was it with Louisville. They already lost by 13 to Louisville. I don't know who else in the ACC is. It's Pitt, it's Clemson, it's Duke, and then it's Carolina and Louisville. Those are like the 5 in the ACC that I think might make the tournament. And Louisville and Carolina, I would say, are on the bubble. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, if I told you right now that in the middle of February, Carolina goes to Clemson and wins, I don't know if that moves your needle much anyways.
No, but that would be huge for them.
They need it.
They would need that. Yeah, it's going to come down to basically Duke. So.
But to have to have any sort of crown jewel on their resume at all, they have to beat Duke.
Jim Larranaga retired, speaking of the ACC. Jim Larranaga, Miami bottomed out, and this season is going horribly for Miami. And Jim Larranaga was like, I'm just going to step down. I'm going to step out of the way. I'm old, and I probably should have stepped away, after the Final Four run, to be completely honest. He's he was a guy I loved having in college basketball. He was such a fun personality, and I love that he finally got back to the Final Four with Miami a couple years ago, and kind of had that moment at his new school. And he turned Miami into, they won the ACC. What year was that? What was the Shane Larkin year? 2012 they won the ACC? The more time goes, no, 2013? 2013. I was off by a year. They won the ACC in 2013. He had a bunch of awesome moments and turned Miami into a team that, frankly, like when I was growing up, Miami basketball was a joke, and you never really paid attention to him. But now he made them something and got them to Final Four. But yeah, it was definitely time, and they are just absolutely dreadful. But I would say Jim Larranaga leaving, and he had the comments after he left where he was like, well, what did he say? It was like basically like NIL.
He said
like,
that they went to
the
Final Four a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And as he's doing his exit meeting with his players, 8 of them told him that they were intending to leave Miami. And he said, pay them a reasonable salary, make them professionals, make it transparent, but I can't deal with and he's right. I can't deal with we just made the Final Four. And now my
players are trying to leave. Yeah, that I want to make sure I framed it right. I knew it was like an NIL type rant, and that's what it was. It was we made the Final Four. All my players wanted money, and then some of them left and whatever. And people were killing them for it, and rightfully so. And that's kind of how it goes these days. Is like a coach of a certain stature retires, it shakes up the not the entire landscape, but people are like, whoa, that's a little surprising. Larranaga's case not as surprising, but like this is coming on the heels of like a Tony Bennett. Jay Wright not too long ago retired when he was seemingly in the prime of his career. Saban did it. You know, there's a lot of this going on in college, and there are hints at like the changing landscape of college sports being the reason why. And inevitably, the general public seems to always just be like, get the fuck out of here, you bozo. Like, you couldn't adapt to the times. Get out. You're mad that your players are making money. And I think I would just pump the brakes and say that like guys who care deeply about the sport, care deeply about their players, care deeply about teaching and coaching, and have made it their life's work, raising concerns about the landscape of what they hold nearest and dearest to themselves, should not just be scoffed at and hand waved and say like, you fucking hypocritical piece of shit, you know? And yeah, I understand like, you know, for some people, for the simpletons out there, you're like, Jim Larranaga, you left George Mason, you make millions of dollars. What's the difference, man? And the difference, I would say, is one, he was signing contracts. Two, I think the coaches, even though they make millions of dollars, and everyone's going to call me like, you know, you're carrying water for the coaches, whatever. I want the players to get paid. Of course I want the players to get paid. I think the biggest frustration these coaches have is that it's like, it's nonstop. It's like the second you sign an NIL deal, the second these players sign NIL deals, they're looking for the next NIL deal. And they're always, and I think the big difference with the coaches, and again, you can call me naive and roll your eyes and say I'm just carrying water for coaches. I'm not. I truly believe this. The difference with the coaches, they are making millions of dollars, and there is an imbalance, and maybe we need to fix that. Maybe, you know, like college basketball coaches shouldn't be making $10+ million a year and their players aren't getting anything, right? I believe when the coaches sign their salary or sign their contracts and they're getting paid all that, they then at least focus on the coaching and like yes, they do all yes, they're chasing money, yes, they're chasing the better job, but at their core, I do believe that they still want to coach the basketball team in front of them. They want to pour everything they have into the job they have. And I think some of the frustration from these coaches is that the ideal scenario is that the player signs the NIL deal and you're like, we got him. Nick Saban, an example. Like, we got a guy at Bama. We got him. He's at Bama. Okay, now let's lock in and let's get to work. And I feel like the frustration these guys have is that the guys get to campus or get ready to lock in and they just never really are locked in because they're always like wanting what's next. And that's obviously a generalization. That's obviously a broad. And there are guys that are doing, you know, all sorts of grains of salt with this and caveats or whatever. But I think that's the general complaint that these guys have. And I feel like it falls on deaf ears because the general public's response whenever a coach like is making comments about this is like, you're a hypocritical piece of shit that was making millions of dollars. And now that your players are getting a cut, you don't like it and you can't handle it. So now you're going to retire. And I just think that's an unfair way of framing it.
The argument that coaches made a shit ton of money and players didn't make much money or any money, was very well received years ago. Now you have players. I mean, you just had in football, Oregon signed a 5-star player, quarterback, came to campus, got offered more, just entered the portal again. He hasn't even played yet.
Yeah.
So what you're saying makes complete sense that there, and that's what Larranaga said in his press conference. There's no transparency though. Like I'm fine with players making money and hey, this is how much he makes and now we're going to do this. It is, they get here, they make this much money. Now they're looking elsewhere. Now they're hearing from other people. And
that's the problem. That's what everyone is losing is like, it's not the money. It's the continuous, and it's not even like you have to re-recruit your players at the end of the year. It's you literally every single day, your players are like, how do I get more money? How do I get more money? How do I get more? Where's the next? And I think there's a hope, a belief, a desire from the coaches and the system at large is like how we have to get to a point where Cooper Flagg should be making $5 million. Cooper Flagg AJ DeBantis should be making $5 million, whatever. Figure out what the free market says. Make a fuck ton of money. Sign that's fine. But like in a perfect world, when you sign the contract or you get your big payday and you show up to campus, let's play some fucking basketball, dude.
Right.
Let's like buy in. And I'm not saying Cooper Flagg's not or DeBantis. I don't mean to throw their names out there that they're not. But I think that's the frustration. And I guess in Larranaga's case, though, if guys at the end of the year, guys want to move on to what's next, that's a little different. I'm not necessarily speaking directly about Larranaga, but I'm just noticing this trend from these coaches raising concerns about this. And it's just such like a weird thing. And like I remember Matt Painter a couple years ago doing it with the transfer portal when Nojel Eastern was a kid that played at Purdue who had a ton of promise and had a lot of great physical tools, and like they were using him at like point guard, and he was like a big bodied point guard, and like you kind of saw vision with him, but he was very raw and he wasn't there yet, and like and I think Matt Painter cared about him deeply. And then he enters the transfer portal. Matt Painter like does a press conference where he's like, I told the kid not to do this, and I don't think this is a great idea. And people killed him for it. And then Nojel Eastern was never heard from again. And you look back on a moment like that and you're like, maybe these coaches who are critical or are raising concerns about what's going on, maybe they are doing it from a place of like I care deeply about this sport. I care about what this is. And it's not just – I'm mad that this guy wants money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my overall thing is like the more this happens, the more I just sense like a vibe from the public. It's like, good, get out of here. You get out of here, Grandpa. Get a new guy in that gets it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm also, as a guy who believes in like the Mayberry, like I always use Mayberry as my go-to. Like I believe in the naivete of college sports and like whatever. I think encouraging the guys who want to be teachers and like really truly love their players, like telling them to get the fuck out of here and then bringing in like more used car salesmen. I don't necessarily love that, but that's the way the world's going. I don't know. When the Larranaga thing happened, everyone was just like dunking on him and clowning on him, and I was like, why does this always happen with all these coaches?
I feel
why does anybody like stop and listen to what the guys are saying?
Well, people liken it to like. So when your grandparents like get a new iPhone and they grew up without phones and they don't even know how to use it, and they're like, I'm just not even fucking dealing with it. That's what people are acting like these old coaches that are retiring are doing. It's like, well, back in my day, you used to have to go to school for 3-4 years. I'm not doing this transfer portal stuff. I disagree. Listen to what some of them are saying and put yourself in their shoes. How do you deal with the day-to-day? You got to recruit your own dudes, but if your dudes are too good, they're leaving. But if they're not good enough, they're leaving. If they're just right, they want more money.
Right. Yeah,
bullshit.
That's basically what it is. Yeah. I don't know. I just think that like, yeah, they I don't know. It's a weird situation where the guys who have the most invested and care the most are told to shut the fuck up and we don't care what you have to say right now. And I'm like, I sort of get that, but I think every single coach in college basketball is fine with their players making money. I think every single one of them. And so I think it's like a straw man deal to be like, this coach just doesn't want his players to get paid. It's like I think every single coach loves that the guys that he has brought to campus that he wants to coach and that he wants to see go on to success. I think he loves the idea of those guys being set financially. Right. I think the coach loves that. It's the rest of the system they don't love. And instead of listening to them, it seems like a lot of people are just like, all right, you get out, bring someone else in. All right, we got to go. I got to go do mostly sports. We ran a little long. There's a lot to talk about, and I didn't even get to like basically half of it, to be honest with you. I want to talk about Derrick Rose. I want to talk about Greg Gumbel. I want to talk about a lot of stuff. Maybe we'll do it next show. But got to run for now. Tuesday, Florida at Tennessee, UCLA at Michigan. Those are two big ones. But Tuesday's got a lot of great games. A lot of great games. But Florida at Tennessee and UCLA at Michigan are two big. If you're paying attention to the SEC and Big Ten races, like I think a lot of people are going to this year. Those are two that could matter greatly. But shout out to Louisville for winning. I wrote that down. I want to make sure I did that. I did that earlier at Virginia. That's huge for that program. And also West Virginia won in Lawrence, Kansas. We glossed over that one. That West Virginia has literally never in the history of their program won in Allen Fieldhouse, and they finally did. But it's weird because like ever since West Virginia joined the Big 12, I feel like they beat Kansas at home all the time. I feel like that's like Kansas going to Morgantown I don't even care who's on either team. I'm always just like, yeah, that's going to be a win for West Virginia because it feels like they upset Kansas all the time. But they've never done it in Lawrence, in Allen Fieldhouse, and they did over the break. So shout out to West Virginia for that. Anything else? I think that's it. You got anything, Cody?
Y'all hear that new Jello Ball song?
All right, that's the show. See you guys on when are we doing this? Thursday?
Yeah.
We're gonna do it Thursday?
Good games Wednesday and Tuesday. So.
Big games Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll be back Thursday. See you guys then.